They say confession is good for the soul, but nobody tells you what happens when two people decide to unburden their souls on the same day. It wasn't planned, at least not on my part. After 3 months of carrying the weight of my infidelity, I'd finally gathered the courage to tell Mark about my affair with a colleague. I never expected him to respond with a confession of his own. That Sunday morning started like any other. We were having brunch at our favorite cafe, the one with the outdoor seating where we'd spent countless weekends during our 8 years of marriage. I'd chosen this public place deliberately, thinking it would force us both to maintain composure when I shared my devastating news. The irony of that decision still makes me laugh bitterly. I waited until we'd finished eating, my hands wrapped around my coffee cup for stability. "I need to tell you something," I began, my rehearsed speech suddenly feeling inadequate. "I've been unfaithful." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and irretrievable. I watched Mark's face, waiting for the shock, the anger, the hurt I'd imagined countless times. Instead, he let out a strange, hollow laugh that made my skin crawl. "Well," he said, setting down his fork with deliberate care, "this is going to sound crazy, but I've been wanting to tell you the same thing." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. The background chatter of the cafe faded to a dull roar as we stared at each other across the table. Two confessed adulterers trying to process this bizarre twist of fate. It felt like a bad joke, or perhaps some cosmic punishment for our mutual betrayal. The details spilled out between us, there among the half-empty coffee cups and abandoned toast. My affair had been with Jason, a new project manager at my firm. It had started during a business trip to Chicago 3 months ago, and continued through stolen moments and late-night meetings. Mark's involvement had been with Sophie, his physical therapist, beginning 4 months ago during his recovery from a skiing accident. Neither of us had suspected the other's infidelity. I'd been so consumed by my own guilt, so careful to hide my tracks, that I'd missed the signs of Mark's deception. He admitted to the same. His own secrets had blinded him to my increasingly erratic behavior. The conversation that followed was surreal. We dissected our respective affairs with an almost clinical detachment, as if discussing characters in a movie rather than our own lives. Mark's relationship with Sophie had been primarily physical, born from vulnerability during his recovery. My connection with Jason had started emotionally before becoming physical, a gradual erosion of boundaries that I justified as friendship until it wasn't. What struck me most was how differently we reacted to each other's confessions. Mark seemed almost relieved by my admission, as if my transgression somehow balanced the scales. I, on the other hand, felt a new kind of betrayal layered over my guilt. Even though I'd done the same thing, learning about his affair felt like a fresh wound. We spent the next few hours walking around the city, trying to make sense of our situation. The usual script for dealing with infidelity didn't seem to apply. How could either of us claim the moral high ground? How could we work through trust issues when we'd both proven untrustworthy? The following weeks were a maze of complicated emotions. We agreed to attend couples therapy, finding a counselor who specialized in infidelity. Dr. Peterson's office became our neutral territory, a space where we could unpack the damage we'd done to our marriage. In those sessions, we discovered that our matched infidelity didn't make reconciliation easier. If anything, it complicated the healing process. We couldn't follow the usual pattern of one partner working to regain trust while the other decided whether to forgive. Instead, we had to navigate dual betrayals, dual reconciliations, dual healing processes. The double standard in how we viewed each other's affairs became apparent quickly. Mark struggled more with the emotional aspect of my relationship with Jason than I did with the physical nature of his affair with Sophie. He couldn't bear the thought of me sharing intimate conversations with another man, while I found myself fixated on the physical details of his encounters. Would it have been easier if I'd only slept with him without the emotional connection? I asked during one particularly intense therapy session. Mark's response was telling. Would it have been easier for you if Sophie meant something more to me than physical comfort? We discovered that gender stereotypes about infidelity ran deep in both of us, despite our progressive views in other areas. Society had conditioned us to view male and female infidelity differently. Men's affairs were often dismissed as purely physical needs, while women's affairs were seen as more threatening because they involved emotions. Dr. Peterson helped us understand that these distinctions were artificial. Betrayal was betrayal, regardless of its nature or the gender of the betrayer. The real question wasn't who had hurt whom more deeply, but whether we could rebuild something worth saving from the ashes of our mutual destruction. The process of rebuilding trust when both partners have broken it is like trying to construct a building with two damaged foundations. We had to shore up our own trustworthiness while simultaneously learning to trust again. It required a level of of honesty that was often uncomfortable. Complete transparency with our phones and schedules, detailed accounts of our whereabouts, immediate disclosure of any contact with our former affair partners. Both of us ended our affairs completely, though the aftermath lingered in unexpected ways. I requested a department transfer at work to avoid daily contact with Jason. Mark found a new physical therapist in Jim, ensuring he wouldn't run into Sophie. These practical changes were the easy part. The harder work was examining why we'd both sought connection outside our marriage. Through therapy, we uncovered patterns of emotional disconnection that had developed gradually over our years together. Career pressures, unspoken resentments, and poor communication had created parallel lives where we functioned as partners, but had stopped truly sharing ourselves with each other. Our affairs had been symptoms of a deeper malaise in our marriage. The question of whether to stay together wasn't easy to answer. Some days, the weight of dual betrayal felt insurmountable. Other days, our shared experience created a strange kind of intimacy. We were the only ones who could truly understand each other's position as both betrayer and betrayed. A year has passed since that Sunday brunch confession. Our marriage today bears little resemblance to what it was before. We've had to dismantle everything we thought we knew about relationships, trust, and forgiveness. The process has been painful, but also enlightening. We've learned that true intimacy requires constant attention and that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but never quite returns to its original form. We've also discovered that healing doesn't follow a linear path. Some weeks bring progress, genuine laughter, renewed physical intimacy, deeper emotional connections. Other weeks, we struggle with triggers and trust issues that send us spinning back into hurt and doubt. The difference now is that we face these challenges together, with complete honesty about our fears and vulnerabilities. Recently, we returned to that same cafe where we'd made our confessions. Sitting at a different table but ordering the same meals, we reflected on how far we'd come. Our marriage isn't perfect. Perhaps it's stronger for not trying to be. We've learned to embrace the complexity of human relationships, to understand that love can coexist with pain, and that forgiveness is both a choice and a process. The most surprising outcome of our matched infidelity has been the depth of self-awareness it forced us to develop. We've had to examine our assumptions about marriage, fidelity, and gender roles. We've had to confront our own capacity for betrayal, while also discovering our capacity for forgiveness. Looking back, I realized that the real question wasn't whether matching infidelities made reconciliation easier or harder, it simply made it different. Our path to healing had to be as unique as our situation. There was no roadmap for rebuilding a marriage where both partners had strayed, so we had to create our own, step by careful step.